Raised my ex-wife's affair baby as my own daughter for 13 years, but now my dad wants to cut her out of his will because she's not a real grandchild of his despite actually loving her. I, 45M, when my daughter, 13F, was born I immediately felt that something was obviously amiss. She was blonde-haired and blue-eyed, which was extremely unlikely for a child of myself and my ex-wife, 39F. I am very Mediterranean, and I have olive skin, dark eyes, and dark hair. My ex-wife has brown eyes and relatively dark brown hair. Her skin is barely lighter than mine. The baby also clearly bore no resemblance to me or anyone in my family at all. I had been having misgivings about my ex, too, and she seemed too quick to express surprise and make excuses. Still though, I didn't want to throw away my marriage over what could have been my own misunderstanding of genetics, and so I signed the birth certificate. I instantly knew that I was going to have a paternity test done, but something else surprised me. When I brought our little girl home, I still fell in love with her. It felt just like bringing my son, 14M, home, and, looking at her, I still just saw her as an innocent, beautiful little baby. We bonded. The paternity test came back negative, as I suspected it would, and I decided that our marriage was over. I still loved our little girl though. My then wife did everything that she could to drag out the divorce and refused to separate or move out. My daughter's biological father, every bit as blonde and blue-eyed as I suspected, turned out to want nothing to do with her or my ex. He was already married with his own family, and his only focus was preventing the situation from blowing back on himself too much. My ex went totally nuts when both I and her affair partner rejected her, and she made some very unfortunate decisions. To make a long story short, she ended up with prison time for crimes including identity theft, assault with a deadly weapon, and grand theft auto, when she stole credit cards and forged documents for both of us, and when she stole her affair partner's car and tried to run him over with it. I ended up with custody of our kids, with the affair partner never even attempting to establish any kind of paternity rights. I didn't want to press the issue myself, as I couldn't deny that I had bonded with this child, even knowing that she wasn't my real daughter. I had been shunning my ex-wife as best I could and trying to move on with life after she was finally out of the house. It wasn't long before I got together with and married my current wife, 34F, and we've since had another 2 children. 10M, 8F, my eldest daughter is a total daddy's girl, and we have a wonderful relationship. She always feels loved, and I treat her the same as my other kids. Even though she obviously stands out, my family accepts her too, or at least that's what I thought. I work for my father's company, and the other day we were out talking about the future and his will, and he was talking about what money/assets etc. he wanted to leave to whom, including his grandchildren, and I noticed that my older daughter had been left out. I mentioned it to him, and he said, "It's nice what you've done for daughter's name, but you have real children, and obviously they should come first." I interrupted him, and I told him that she is my real daughter, and that I thought she should be treated equally. He just paused and looked at me for a moment, and he said, "I guess you feel how you feel," before he noticed I was still about to argue with him, and he shrugged and moved the conversation on to things about work and my siblings. I was too polite to try to force the matter at the time, but it sort of stuck with me. My father isn't the type of man to harp on a point, and I am certain that he's content to have said his piece and would let the matter drop. He could certainly tell that what he said upset me, and so I doubt he'd bring it up again. Frankly, he sort of raised me the same way. At the time, I was shocked, because he's always seemed to accept my daughter as a part of the family. He buys her gifts for her birthday and for Christmas, and he makes her feel welcome, but, thinking about it, he really is just a kind, polite, and generous man in a lot of ways. He will and has bought Christmas gifts for high school friends or significant others, if he knew they were coming, and the same for other gift-giving occasions. He's generally very hospitable to anyone his friends or family bring around, so I thought that maybe it was just that, and I misinterpreted. My wife is Asian, and so my eldest daughter always stands out. She's thin, and blonde, and blue-eyed, unlike pretty much anyone else in my family, and she's taller than any of the other girls or even most of the women, really, so I'm aware that she might look like the neighbor kid visiting or something. My wife loves her, and I know that she 100% accepts her as one of our kids, and she has been a great mom, stepmom. I talk to my own mother, though, and while she's definitely closer to my daughter than my father is, they interact a lot more, and she includes my daughter with the other kids, other girls in family traditions and activities. I got a little bit of the same vibe from her. She was much more diplomatic, but it seems like she may also sort of consider my daughter to be sort of a guest, unfortunate orphan I'm hosting or something like that. She pointed out that I can make my own will however I want. My daughter knows that she isn't biologically mine. That would have been hard to hide, even if we'd really had the opportunity. She doesn't want anything to do with either of her bio parents though. She's seen her bio dad perhaps a handful of times in her entire life, and I don't even think he can remember her middle name. He seems to have pretty successfully kept his family together and his wife from leaving him, but he definitely doesn't want any involvement. My ex-wife continued to spiral for a long while, and she lives in another state with another man and her own new family at this point. She mercifully rarely makes contact. I've never really tried to go after either of them for money. I don't need it, and it's not a pot I want to stir. My siblings are mostly supportive if a little bit mixed on the issue. Some of them say that they could never raise the child of a partner's affair, but all of them say that they love and accept their niece. I just can't get over the way that I feel distant and upset about what my father said though. He's an extremely kind and generous man, and he's always taken care of his family. He's given me opportunities and a lifestyle that I could never have achieved without him. I love him and I look up to him. Maybe that's why I feel sort of, I don't know, betrayed? It feels wrong that she's the only one of his grandchildren to be left out of his will, apparently because he doesn't consider her a real grandchild. Intellectually, I can accept that he's technically correct, but it feels wrong. She is my daughter. Am I wrong though? Am I just being entitled and unreasonable here? Am I the asshole? Comments. Jacoby Dave, I get why members of your family might consider you foolish for raising the result of your ex-wife's affair, but honestly, it speaks well of your character that you treat her as your own. I wonder if your parents would be similarly non-accepting if you had adopted a child, because, practically, that is what happened. I wish you and your family the best. NTA. Lawfox 32, I think Op should ask his parents that. If I had adopted a child, would you feel this way about that child? Okay, because that's what I did. I put my name on her birth certificate and raised her knowing she wasn't biologically mine. I adopted her and she's my daughter. Live Western _1389, I agree. And TBH, she was born into your family and you have claimed her as your own child, same as if you'd adopted her or brought her into the world through birth. That's very important to me. And TBH, anybody that didn't want to accept that and wanted to treat that child differently from my other kids would not be someone I would want spending much time with any of my kids. NTA. I think you are an amazing dad. Agile weight 7571, my stepmother did this for me although I wasn't an affair child. My father died when I was 15 and my birth mother spent most of her life institutionalized for mental health concerns. My stepmother, like you, was a saint. You will probably never really fully know the good you have done. Robert the World Maker, no. You're a god. Damn. Saint. Problem is, you're thinking other people will be saints too, and they're not. Their reactions are understandable, but it makes me sad for her when she eventually learns the truth of how they see her. Update, just a small update. Thanks for the comments and wishes. It really put a lot of things into perspective and it confirmed to me that I needed to say something. Some people seem surprised at the way I let my daughter's bio parents off the hook, so to speak. The main reason I've never tried to go after my ex or her affair partner for child support is that my daughter is more important than money. I'm not struggling at all, and I have the support I need. More importantly though, I have my daughter. Even though the affair partner didn't apparently want anything to do with her, my lawyer did mention way back in the day that either he or my wife, being her biological parents, could have a strong case for seeking custody. I know I'm biased, but her bio dad seems like a huge asshole, and I know he doesn't care about her. I wouldn't put it past him to try to get custody just to duck out of paying child support though, if his hand was forced. And the idea of her having to go stay with him is just something I don't even want to think about. Kind of the same thing when her mom got out of prison. She seemed like she was very quick to go shack up with her new guy, and she seemed willing to let the matter lie, so I did the same. The fact that neither of them tried to get her, or, in my ex's case, the way she hasn't even bothered to keep much contact with our son either tells me more than everything I need to know about the kind of parents they are, would be. They only seem interested in their pre-existing/new families respectively. I wouldn't want to try to back them into trying to take custody. With my daughter being 13, it's possible that we've sort of run out the clock on that matter, but it's still not drama we need or a risk worth taking. In better and more important news though, I talked with my dad. I met with my father for lunch, which was easy enough, as he's around most days and we could sync up some time. I mentioned that I wanted to talk about my daughter not being in his will, and I told him that even if it meant dividing what was being left to me or my other kids, I felt it was really important for her to be included. I also mentioned, as I felt, and as a lot of people pointed out, that it would be devastating for her to find out that she'd been excluded after his death. My father agreed that that was a really good point, and he said that she is a lovely girl, that he does love her, and that he wouldn't want to add extra pain or bitterness to her life, especially at such a time. Also, it had gotten around to him that I'd been sort of polling my siblings a little bit, and I think my mom talked to him some, and he said, "This is obviously very important to you. You're my son. I can just change it. It's not so much money anyway." And he was right. The amounts of money being left to individual grandchildren aren't massive, but the gesture and the thought are what's most meaningful. Mostly everything is going to my mom and or us as kids anyway. Really, there was no reason for me to expect him to have been stubborn or hard-hearted about any of this. It was just something that we needed to talk about. My father reiterated that everyone loves my daughter and that she'll always be family and always have a home. He has a gold bracelet that he has worn somewhat occasionally over the years, and he mentioned that my daughter thought it was pretty. When she was very little, she noticed it on his wrist and said that jewelry was for girls. He laughed and explained to her that sometimes boys wear jewelry too. She thought it was nice and he let her try it on even though it was way too big for her wrist. She was a little toddler then. I didn't know about that moment between them, and I thought it was really sweet that he remembered. He said that he was going to leave her the bracelet and a note, and that as far as money goes she'd get the same share as the rest of my kids. So we had a nice lunch and we both felt better for it. Nothing too dramatic, but really the best way things could have gone. Thanks everyone, for confirming that I wasn't being crazy and confirming that I needed to talk to my father and set things right. Comments, appropriate area 1716, this is a happy update. Your father is a good man and he raised you to be a wonderful man. Rage Sadness Alanon, I love a story of good people being good people. Thank you. It's sad that there have to be such shitty ones to make the good ones stand out, but I guess we have to take that with life. I hope Oop and his family have a wonderful one. May Wellflower, let be real, Oop didn't have step up, but thank goodness he did because he doing right by all his kids, whether bio or not. His side of the family needs to understand that his adopted daughter may have came to him under fucked up circumstances. That doesn't change basic fact that they all know that Oop sees her as his real daughter and they need to respect that. I hope his side of family continue to have that epiphany before they find themselves on outs with him and all his kids. Alieska 23, Oop adopted his daughter. But more importantly, his daughter has an actual blood sibling with her older brother. A family of kids with a mix of 4 different parents. They are all interconnected even if some aren't directly blood related. They are a family, and Oop actually understands that. He is an incredible father and his kids will grow up to be good people. Quasar Random 1234, I was there for the original posts, and was infuriated. Your adopted child is your child, full stop, no qualifiers. Your child's child is your grandchild, full stop, no qualifiers. Oop's father partially got it, but it sounds like mainly for Oop's sake, not his granddaughter's. Average Cypress, sometimes, that's all we can ask for. By another name, and it's much preferable to him sticking to his original plan. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Pregnant wife cheated on me with her affair partner, so I just waited until our anniversary so I could expose her in front of everyone. Also, the baby wasn't even mine. I was married to my ex-wife for almost 3 years, but we had to go out separate ways due to her infidelity. My ex-wife and I grew up in the same town, so we weren't complete strangers when we started dating. We even went to the same high school, but I was a couple of classes ahead of her, and we didn't get close to each other until after college. From the beginning, I didn't want to leave our town for greener pastures or anything. I loved it there and always wanted to be close to the people who mattered. The same applied to my ex-wife. She returned to overlook her parents' restaurant after she graduated from college, and that's when our relationship started. We became perfect friends after she returned, and some months after we got to know each other better, we started dating. Since we all lived in a small town, everyone knew we were in a relationship and, possibly, would end up marrying each other, and that's precisely what happened. After a year and 7 months of being in a relationship, we got married and had a beautiful wedding. I worked as a carpenter and earned a decent amount of money monthly. So, I gave my ex-wife the kind of wedding she wanted. It wasn't so big, but it was what she wanted, and everything turned out as planned. After we got married, we went on our honeymoon, but just 2 days after we left, we had to return because her mother passed away in her sleep. It was a very tough season for both of us, and the first year of our marriage was filled with mourning. She was an only child, and I imagined how terrible she must have felt to lose her mother like that. Meanwhile, I supported her in any way I could. I grieved with her, cared for her, and was there for her at all times. It wasn't how I wanted us to start our marital journey, but since death was something no one could predict or stop, I could do nothing. My ex-wife started coming out of her shell in the second year of our marriage. Because of her loss, she had become a shadow of herself and lost interest in many things. When this happened, I was so glad and looked forward to having the kind of marriage I always imagined. The first year had been very tough for me, and I loved her so much and didn't want to break our vows. I expected that our relationship/marriage would be fixed after she got over her mother's death, but that didn't happen. I felt like she was cold to me, and even if we got intimate, I didn't feel the spark we used to have while we were dating. Most times, it felt like I was forcing myself on her, and it kept getting worse that I had to do some research online. With my research, I learned a lot of things and understood why she acted that way. I knew I had to give her time, and it felt like we were drifting apart the more time I gave her. I didn't enjoy the first 2 years of my marriage, but I had to stay because I expected her to snap out of that state and change. One time, I even confronted her about her change in character and how I wasn't enjoying our marriage, but she called me selfish and insensitive. The very annoying part was that if we went out to a wedding, gathering, or whatever event we were attending, she would be very active, laugh at funny and dry jokes, and interact with people like everything was cool with her. But as soon as we got home, she would change. Our marriage was getting very boring, and after constantly nagging about her attitude for weeks, I started to see a few changes. She became more active at home, spent time with me, and we started doing all the fun things we used to do as singles but never had the opportunity to do in our marriage because of the tragedy that struck. Sincerely, her changes made me feel loved, and throughout that time, our marriage was shaky, and she was grieving. I never tried to play smart with or look at any woman in a way I shouldn't have. I'll admit, there were temptations, especially since I wasn't getting what I wanted and our conversations were so boring, but I loved her so much, and I knew what a 5-minute mistake could do to our marriage. Our home was filled with happiness and laughter for the following months, and I enjoyed her company so much. The icing on the cake was when we found out she was pregnant, and I was so excited I would become a father. It meant so much to me. Overall, I was glad I was finally having the marriage of my dreams. About 6 months after my ex-wife found out she was pregnant, I decided to make things up to her. I knew the news of her mother's death had ruined our honeymoon, and even though she never mentioned it, I knew she would love to return to the same place. It was expensive, but I started saving for it 2 months after things returned to normal. After all the bookings and preparations were made, I broke the news to her, and we didn't just take it as our honeymoon but as a romantic getaway. And she really loved it because our wedding anniversary was only a week after we'd returned from the getaway, and we planned on renewing our vows in front of friends and family. The renewal of vows was my idea, and I thought it was necessary because we were only beginning to enjoy our marriage. Eventually, we went on our second honeymoon getaway and had so much fun together. We visited places, took multiple pictures, and, most importantly, tried different foods. We were only meant to spend a week there, and on our 6th day there, I made a shocking discovery. I can't really recall what took me to my ex-wife's phone. I think she was gisting me about the news that went viral on Facebook, and since I wasn't on Facebook then, she gave her phone to me so I could read it. Then she went into the bathroom to shower. And because I wasn't very interested in the news, I pressed the return key, and it opened her text messages. I know I shouldn't have read her messages, but I couldn't resist the temptation. It was my first time doing so. There was a name saved as my happiness in Spanish, and it piqued my curiosity. So, I opened the message, and to my greatest surprise, it was our former wedding planner. There were also a lot of pictures shared between them, nudes, pictures of them together in bed, and photos of them kissing each other. Another thing was they had been dating each other for 2 years under my nose, and a month after our wedding anniversary was their second anniversary. At that point, I felt the room spin, and my chest almost exploded from being too tight. I would really love to explain how I felt, but no amount of words can describe it. I'm still somewhat surprised that I was smart enough to forward all their messages to my number in that state of shock and delete all that I sent to my phone so she wouldn't know. Honestly, the rest of our romantic getaway was ruined, and there was a change in my attitude too. I was so worried that the child she was carrying wasn't mine, and for nights, I did not sleep well or think straight. I even missed working on most of my clients' projects because I was not in the right mind. Meanwhile, I kept everything in and did not confront her about anything. She was so engrossed with our small renewal of vows party that she thought I was having mood swings again. So, on our anniversary, we did our thing, and I was patient enough for our vows to be renewed. They didn't mean anything to me anymore, and after we were done, I asked that the gifts I got for her be brought in so she could open them in front of everyone. Anyone who saw the size of the gifts could tell they were framed pictures, but maybe she thought they were pictures from our second honeymoon. I asked for the photos to be given to her, so she could open it herself, and she did. Immediately she opened it, everyone gasped, and she froze. I asked her to open the second one, and she reluctantly opened it with tears in her eyes. Then I opened the last one myself. All 3 pictures were of her and our former wedding planner, in bed, naked together, and a picture of them kissing each other. Funnily enough, he was in attendance, and his wife and children were there, too, since we were close in some way. I felt so satisfied to expose my ex-wife and embarrass her in front of everyone. Then I told her it was over between us, and I wanted nothing to do with the child she was carrying because it was obviously not mine. She cried, begged me, and even said she didn't know how she entered an affair with him, but she was drawn to him because he comforted her more and didn't fake his grieving like I did. I was shocked to hear her say that because I sacrificed so much in her grief to be with her. It hurt, and it was more reason to get her out of my life. We divorced shortly after, and the whole town carried the news. The wedding planner's wife was so mad, too, that she divorced him, and in addition, he was forced to retire after the word spread like wildfire. I never took responsibility for the pregnancy, and the wedding planner said it wasn't his until DNA proved it was. It still hurts me whenever I remember what I got in return for being patient with my ex-wife and loving her foolishly. I haven't healed yet, and the wound opens each time I see her or bump into her. It's also been 4 years, and I haven't been in another relationship since then. I don't know if I will, but I'm sure I can never love another woman the way I loved my ex-wife. That part of me is gone.